Hi everyone! So recently we ran a hardcore SSF community event in Diablo 4 Season 9 and I want to talk about that. We just concluded it here. I made this post on YouTube and on Twitter advertising this, and then we had people join my Discord. We have some channels there like submitting their runs and gathering points, and that was a ton of fun. If you know the PoE gauntlets, that is kind of like a mini gauntlet that we did here. It was kind of like a hard mode event with certain rule sets here that made the game more difficult than normal. And we ran this event for 9 days. So it was from 18th of July to 27th. So it concluded this Sunday. And yeah, I just want to go through it and like talk about the outcome a little bit. I think this is certainly something I would like to continue doing. Maybe, for example, next season we might do something similar again. But it seems like a lot of people that participated had a lot of fun here. We also had a lot of people trying out hardcore for the first time. Our intention was to kind of get people into playing hardcore a little bit, especially through those very low progression caps here, where there was like a very little grind involved, and we had a pretty even playing field for everyone, even those that hadn't played hardcore before or didn't even have the renown on hardcore, for example, allowed them to still be competitive. In fact, the overall winner of this event was Ava, one of our Maxwell guys. He's our rogue class lead, and he actually never played hardcore before this, or never played the sword that he got in this event, and he won it anyway. So that was kind of interesting to see. For example, he's an absolute Giga Chat blaster, and just kind of took the win here in the overall points ranking. So the idea was that with those very scuffed and weak characters, we would go through the game, and we would only have, for example, 100 Paragon, 8 Masterworks, maximum 1 Mythic, 1 Unique, and only Royal Gems, no Grand Gems, and no trading and grouping of any kind, of course. So Hardcore SSF is kind of the way for this. So the points were distributed in the way that you get +1 per pit tier, and then +1 per boss per difficulty. So each boss was up to 4 points, so there is a total of 11 bosses if we exclude small Belial, all of the lair bosses, Lilith, Astaroth, and so on. And then we had like a few kind of funny objectives with a +1 point you could get for hitting the training dummy for 1337k damage. A few people did that. We had a tiebreaker in case we get people with the same points, but that actually didn't happen, unfortunately. We didn't have any PvP, but who knows, maybe we're gonna log in and sacrifice our characters anyway. But yeah, this is kind of like how that went. And then people just kind of like submitted their runs here. We also have this channel. You can check this out if you want to see the videos. We have a lot of people like actually recording themselves. We have a lot of rip clips that we went through, and we crowned some winners in various categories. For example, the most funny rip, the most deserved rip, the most heartbreaking, and the most daring. And there's also all the other rip clips here that you can check. So we kind of had a little closing ceremony on stream, which is also linked here in my Discord. So we had like a 2-hour kind of like going through all the results. I was hanging out with the boys on Discord. So we had a few of our Maxwell guys, for example, participating. There was Chronix, Panda, Condis, Ava, me, and then of course the people from the community that also participated. I do know that a lot of people also kind of like played by our rules, even though they didn't really submit any runs. So I had a lot of my viewers and also from the other streamers here that, just kind of like played along, but didn't really contribute or like submit their runs. So first of all, hope everyone enjoyed it, either watching or playing this kind of event. And also, if you have any kind of ideas for something similar, or maybe other, formats or other types of events that you would like to see, then leave some comments down in the comments section. And we are looking for inspiration to do more like this. The one thing that kind of bothers me is that it's very difficult to really moderate these kind of events. So that's also, for example, why we didn't have prizes for this one. It was just kind of like, just for fun. We kind of came up with this last minute and decided to just kind of go for it. But for example, for like a season start scenario, I guess there would be a bit more of an even playing field where we could consider like a race to certain milestones, or, something similar to this, where we give people a certain amount of time and maybe relax those caps or relax the grouping requirement and these kind of things, so that people can actually prepare and then have some real competition going on and maybe actually win something. But for now, that's just what we had here. But I do have to say, it is actually quite impressive to see what some of the people and some of the classes were actually able to accomplish under those rules. So a Paragon 100 character with 8 Masterworks, 1 Unique and 1 Mythic, that obviously means that certain builds were just straight up not possible. For example, the Barbs, they were kind of like down bad here in this whole event because they are already relatively weak, and then they couldn't even play their best builds, like Lunging Strike, for example, and so on. I guess there was the possibility to play Mighty Throw, but no one actually really did that. So maybe Barbs could have caught up a little bit here, but in the end, besides the Mighty Throw stuff, there was not really much else. And I think they mostly did like, some Elemental Surge, Lucky Hit builds, and some really wacky stuff, and maybe some Earthquakes, and that was about it. So we see this here, for example, Contest was the Barb winner. I colored each class winner basically with a certain like color here, and they were definitely way behind, even though Contest did a really good job. He's obviously a big like hardcore experienced blaster, but even so, we kind of like ended up with Barbs being quite behind, and unsurprisingly, Sorks being at the top. So Sorks, they have their Ophidian Iris for Hydra, and this is basically all they need. And obviously they were blasting, and Ava actually managed to clear a Pit 90 and kill all T4 bosses. In fact, he's the only other person besides me that killed all the bosses on T4. I also did that as a rogue. So I was kind of close behind, but the rogue was just not as powerful in clearing the pit as the Hydra, of course. Hydra is kind of crazy. But I managed to do an 86 at least with my rogue with Twisting Blades. So that is, yeah, also, I guess, a pretty decent result. So I was quite happy with this, but I was not able to actually catch Ava in the end. Then we also had a relatively close result here with Panda on the Druid, also one of our Maxwell boys, but he's usually more of a Sork main, but he does play all the classes, so he was kind of experienced anyway. And we had Sklopper on the Spiritborn, so there was an 85 clear, actually pretty close here. This was, I think this was done with Balazan stuff. So I was actually initially expecting Spiritborn would win this event. Although they do have a bit of a hard time against the T4 bosses, they can definitely push way higher thanks to all of the bugs and so on that the Balazan builds have right now. So I was actually expecting we probably see some like 100 plus or something. But on the other hand, it's a very squishy build, so for like a hardcore event with like these low progression caps, it would be pretty tough to even survive. But if we survive, then I think I would have easily seen like 100 or even higher than that. And that could have led to a Spiritborn win, but in the end we just got this here. There were a few other Spiritborns that also did pretty well. I think Hand Sanitizer was basically playing only Evade and actually managed to do an 82. And I think he ripped somewhere on like one of the bosses, so he didn't actually like finish all of these points here. Else this could have been kind of close. And yeah, Druids, obviously Giga Chats with the Polarize. They only need 1 unique, and then they're blasting with the Lightbringer. And they're like basically invincible. So Panda, for example, also cleared all of the T4 bosses besides Lilith, and Lilith got him in the end. So this was also very fun to see. Yeah, and lastly, we had one Necro participant, which was She, and they unfortunately ripped somewhere on like one of the bosses and then never came back. So that was a bit sad, but they like changed classes in the end, and there was like another entry here with Sork, so they swapped over in the end. But unfortunately, not much Necro participation. I was hoping to see a little bit what would be going on there. But these were kind of like the winners of each of the classes. Again, no prizes or something, but it was really fun to see and very exciting to see that actually so many people managed to take out at least some of the T4 layer bosses. Obviously, with such a weak character, you'd have to invest a lot into defenses to even survive, like the smallest hits basically. For example, I was playing a Spiritborn as like a second character just for fun after I was done with my rogue, and I just died to T4 Zia because my little toe stepped into one of the ground puddles. I just instantly evaporated basically. So yeah, some classes, some builds definitely had some issues there, and yeah, still exciting to see how far we can get. Here's, for example, a clip from my Torment 4 Lilith kill. It took me 8.5 minutes to take down Lilith in these conditions, so it was a pretty tough fight. I was almost getting one-tapped by everything. And we had like a similar encounter as well with Ava, who took down T4 Lilith. I think he fought her for like 6 minutes on the Sork, so Sork obviously had a bit more damage. But it was also like a really close encounter, and both of us were almost getting one-tapped like a few times throughout the fight. And then you have like these like ramping damage taken mechanics with those stacks here, so it kind of gets harder and harder as you go. So that was very exciting, and it really brought back this old school, like, season 0 feeling of taking down Lilith for the first time, and that was so much fun. So we kind of hit the mark here in terms of like the difficulty, of you know, making this achievable but extremely challenging. And when I was doing this run here, like we had so many viewers as well in that moment, and everyone was like pogging out and you know, watching this run. And similar with Ava, for example, like we were going through it later on the stream and watching his clear, and we watching, like, you know, for example, Panda's attempt where he died on T4 Lilith and so on. And that was just like a really cool scenario. Where, you know, it is not just you walk in and then you one-shot the boss and, you know, like how it works these days, basically. But, you know, an actual encounter. It felt like a real pinnacle challenge. And hopefully also gives Blizzard some food for thought, maybe for the future, for like stuff that you would like to see in terms of like high-end challenges, some actual end-game bosses that are exciting and really tough and give you something to chew on, even on like a very decked out character, for example. Some of the other bosses were also very challenging. For example, Andariel, I guess, comes as no surprise that she's extremely dangerous, even though the fight is much shorter. Here's like a clip from Ava, for example, taking down Andariel. And yeah, it was also really impressive to see how people actually did that with, you know, those really squishy, low paragon characters with like really scuffed gear, and it was still possible to do. So it was really fun. And obviously, like a lot of people that didn't really do the T4 bosses, but maybe in T3 or maybe on T2, and it's still something, and cool to see that people tried. There's obviously a lot of clips and a lot of submissions here in this channel, so you can also go through and kind of see what other people did and, you know, what kind of boss fights they had. And, you know, also all of the different classes. I'm not going to go through every single clip now. But overall, really good job here by everyone participating. And of course, we had the rip clips here as well. So as I mentioned earlier, we had a few winners. So we went through everything here. I'm not going to go through every single clip, but we can maybe see the winners of the 4 different categories. So we had the funniest rip, which was by Chronix against Belial. So we have this clip here. So he was crowned the winner for the funniest clip. He was doing T3 Belial on his really scuffed barb. And this was already a really long encounter. I'm gonna fast forward this slightly. And yeah, he was actually doing a really good job dodging everything until, yeah, he got clapped. And the reason why it was so funny is especially because of his reaction. So he won that funniest rip clip, but he did have a few other ones that are also pretty good, to be honest. Then we had the most deserved rip here. That was KO with his barb as well. So he was doing a pit 60 pushing. He actually had cleared, I think, a lot of the bosses and stuff already, and was pushing up with his, I think, Hoda barb. And yeah, he's sitting here in a pit 60, trying his best. And then, well, this happened basically on the towards the end of the boss encounter, where he just kind of like boom, stood in the shadow explosions here from like the one of the pit shadows basically, and I guess he didn't see it, he didn't move, but he won the most deserved rip, so congratulations. Then we had the most heartbreaking rip. That was Grisexia on a T4 Sorc. He was probably the biggest contender. He was playing a Sorc, pretty decked out as well, with like an insane amulet and other stuff. So probably a contender for beating Ava, for example, on the Sorc, of comfortably farming to town 4, and I think also having taken down some of the bosses and so on. And then he ripped in the volcano after a Nightmare Dungeon clear. So that was kind of oof. And we had the most daring rip here. That was Ballist Player, another Sorc on T4 Andariel. So we watched this one. That was a very cool clip as well. After a pretty lengthy fight, I'm gonna like speed this up a little bit. But yeah, you see like a lot of back and forth here, and you know, a relatively squishy character dodging everything like a champ. And yeah, and then towards the end of the encounter, we had this occurrence here where I think he died just because he thought the fight was over, with Andariel disappearing into the last intermission phase, and he just whoop, walked into the fire beam. So that was a bit unfortunate, because he was also doing really well with his Sorc here, but it is what it is. So those are our rip winners. These are our yeah, class winners. By the way, in case you're wondering, we did have mandatory random classes basically for all of the streamers. So that was kind of funny. Before the event started, we kind of like sat down on my stream and I was spinning the wheel to roll the class for everyone, or like also people that just didn't know what to play. We had this thing here, and we had a lot of fun actually rigging the wheel, and well, rolling rogue for myself and bar for everyone else mostly. So that is basically how that worked. And yeah, we had like the classes pre-selected for the streamers here, but everyone else was free to choose whatever they wanted. And some people just asked me, like, even when they're not streaming, like, just spin the wheel. So I did that for like, I don't know, 30 different people or something. And that was also pretty funny because it actually gave people a bit of a reason to try out some of the other classes or get familiar with some builds that they weren't really thinking to play. And we actually saw some pretty cool innovation here with some of the setups. And also this like Paragon limitation with only 128 points made some really cool setups possible where, you know, people were really trying to rush all of the legendary nodes, or maybe some people were trying to include more glyphs, and it was really depending on the class and the build a bit, and it was not this kind of like very stale, just kind of like pick everything meta. In any case, that's it for the summary here. I'll link this sheet down in the description, and you can also, for example, find my Discord here and the channels if you want to like look through some of these things a little bit as well. Otherwise, if you have any ideas for, you know, future events or something like that, what would you like to see, even as a viewer, even if you don't want to participate, I'll be all ears, and, you know, just let me know in the comments. Otherwise, this is it. So hope you enjoyed that. I wish everyone like a, you know, happy remaining season 9 for now. For me, it's slowly coming to an end. I have a few more videos coming out. I want to do a few more build guides. And some of the pushes that I'm doing right now, I've cleared like 109 on my Druid and 120 on my Spiritborn so far, so I might go a little bit higher than that. And other than that, I'm kind of like wrapping it up here myself. So for now, hope you enjoyed this, and I'll see you guys next time.